Hello, I'm Professor Toybox, and I'm back in my Asgard toy box with Loki to continue our short series on storytelling. In the first episode, I talked about the general principles of visual storytelling, or how to tell a story without words, and we looked at some of the creativitoys that can help us tell a story in the Disney Infinity toy box. Last time, we actually built a small story using the limited text options that are available, and we set up this mission giver who seems to have wandered away from the corner over here where I set her up. That's interesting. And she tells the player she needs their help, and we use the radar marker to direct the player over to the palace and down the stairs to Odin's treasure vault, where they fought some stormtroopers and prevented the Empire from capturing the powerful artifacts there. Today, we're going to tell another story, and this time we're not going to use any text at all. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and wander over here. We have to run past Sif anyway, and I'm curious to see if she'll recognize Loki. Last time, Thor and Sif had some interesting things to say to each other, so I'm curious. Let's see if she recognizes Loki.
Loki.
She doesn't have much to say to him. That's pretty funny. Cool. All right, well, anyway, we're going to come down here and set up a mission giver over here. And what I have in mind for this, in an ideal world where I had full text control, what I'd like is to find a mission giver over here. And when I approached and talked to them, they would tell you that this strange ship hovering up in the air up here has just launched some fighter craft, and I need to get up there and do something about it before they destroy the city. Of course, the text displayer doesn't have anything like that that's going to help me tell the player that that's the problem or what they need to do about it. And so we're going to have to do this all visually, and we're going to do this using the techniques of visual storytelling and the creativitoys that will allow us to do that. So the first thing we're going to need is a mission giver. And so I'm going to come up here to the Disney Infinity townspeople, and we have this Asgardian soldier here, and I'm going to set him up over here. And I'm going to have to be kind of quick about this again, because once I drop him down, he's going to want to wander off. And I need to get in here and set his properties and get him to stand still before he goes away. None. And actually, I'm going to have him jump up and down. And that way it shows how excited he is. He's trying to get your attention desperately. And he's a little short, so that might help us see him when we're approaching. Okay, so we have our mission giver, but of course we don't have any way to interact with him yet. And unless the player wanders over here, he's never even going to see him. So for that we need two toys. We need the radar marker, and we need a dynamic trigger. These are the same two toys we set up last time for our mission giver. So we're going to come in here and connect the radar marker to our actor, which is this little Asgardian soldier. And then we'll set the properties. And the beacon type, I'm going to leave this as a blue exclamation point. As I mentioned last time, the blue in the playsets seems to be for side quests and yellow for the main quest. So we'll leave this as a blue exclamation point. The location, we're going to make it the connected actor. And we're going to turn this on by default when we come into the toy box. So there we go. He's jumping up and down, and he has a radar marker so we can find him. Now we'll set up the dynamic trigger area. We're going to connect that to our same actor. And again, this sets up a radius around this guy that when we approach, we can have it trigger certain things. So under the properties, we're going to set that to be not this creativitoy, but the locator, or actually the connected actor, that we just hooked up. Trigger distance, just like last time, we're going to set this to 6. And there we go. So at this point, we've set up all we can set up with this Asgardian soldier here. And now, if we approach and walk up to him, nothing's going to happen. And we can't use any text, so we're going to have to show the player what's expected of them. And we need to show them three things. We need to show them what the problem is, and what they can do about it, and where they need to go to do that. So in order to do that, we're going to use a couple of cameras. And I'm going to go ahead and back into Spark mode for the moment so I can get up here. And the first thing I want to show them is what the problem is. And so we're going to put a camera up here by the Star Destroyer so that when it launches the TIE Fighters, we can see them launching. And that'll tell us what the problem is that we want the player to solve. And I'm going to go ahead and lift the camera up a little bit here, because I'd like to see some of the city behind it, and we'll put the camera right here. And I'm going to connect it to this locator, which will show me the view that I want. And I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit here. I think that will work. We'll try it there. And I'm not intending this to be a full tutorial on cameras, but I'll show you enough of what you need in order to be able to set this up. So we'll come in here to the camera and connect it to the locator. That's going to be the camera target, and we're using a target camera. There's 4 different kinds of cameras. This is the best one, I think, to use for cutscenes. And we're going to set the properties for this. The start transition, there's several options here. There's cut, which is kind of obvious. It cuts from the original camera to this one. There's a fade that you can do, which is a little bit buggy. And there's something called swing, which you can use to transition between cameras. We'll just leave this set at cut. For right now, for testing purposes, I'm going to turn on this define duration, and we're going to set the duration to be about 3 seconds. That should tell me rather quickly what this view looks like and if I need to make any tweaks. The camera type, there's 3 different types. Stationary, basically the camera is just going to not move at all, and it'll just point in a certain direction, and things can move in and out of the camera, and it's not going to follow anything. That's not going to really help us here. Follow is kind of obvious. That's going to follow the target, which is the locator, or it could follow a connected actor or the player. Focus is where you set it up on kind of like a tripod, and the camera doesn't move, but it will rotate and follow the player. It just won't follow along behind them, so you can actually run away from the camera, but if you go left or right, it'll follow you. So follow is really what we need. And the end transition, I'll leave that for cut right now. Player viewport is what we're going to see, so we can put it in just the triggering player's viewport if we have 2 players, or we could say show the same thing in each player's viewport. I'm going to come down here and set it to shared viewport so that it just uses the whole screen for both players. Glow through isn't really necessary because there's nothing in between us and the target. This just puts an outline. If a block or something moves in between you and what your target is, it'll allow you to see through it. We're not going to need that. Our camera target is the locator we've connected. And I'm not going to use the camera position to set the zoom distance. That's going to be fixed. Alright, so there we have the camera looking down towards the target, which is our locator. And now we'll go ahead and come back over here, and we'll connect up this dynamic trigger to that camera, and we can see what it looks like. We may have to make a few little tweaks here to get this to look the way we want. So new logic connection, when entered by player, any, and this is the area around our mission giver again that we would be entering. We're going to come up here to our camera, and we're going to activate it. And it'll run for 3 seconds and then deactivate itself. So now we can come back over here and test this out. Okay. All right, so we come over to our mission giver, and that shows us what the camera sees. And I think I'm going to make one little tweak because there's some empty space off to the left there where you see the tip of the Star Destroyer. So I'm going to move that locator just slightly. That's really close though to what I want to see. And I'm going to move this locator over just a little bit. And put it there. And then we'll come back over here and test it one more time. This can get a little bit finicky sometimes as you have to run back and forth and test things. But I think that might have it. There we go. We see the whole Star Destroyer in the picture now. So that should give us a good clear view of the TIE fighters when they launch. I'm not going to hook that up just yet though, because I don't want to have a bunch of TIE fighters flying around here and bugging me while I'm trying to put this together. So now we have our mission giver, and we walk up to them, and they've shown us what the problem is, the Star Destroyer up there, and the fact that it will be launching TIE fighters. So now we need to show them what the solution is, and for that we're going to set up a second camera down here. And I'm going to do something a little bit different with this camera just to show you some of the options you have available to you. So I'm going to hook this, I'm going to put this locator right about here. And we'll put the target camera, the second camera, over here about like so. And I'm going to connect this up to this locator. And the properties, we're going to set this up the same as we did the other one for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and, actually I'm going to set the start transition for this one to swing, because this is coming off of the other camera. For right now we'll use a defined duration of 3 seconds. Camera type follow. The end transition, when we're done, we'll just cut back to the regular camera. Player viewport again for consistency. We'll keep this set to the shared viewport. Glow through is off. Camera target will be the connected locator. And we're going to turn off the setting zoom distance option here. Okay, so now we have a camera looking at the solution. And what we could do is we could go up to the camera up by the Star Destroyer, and when that's deactivated, set up a logic connection for that to come over to the second camera and activate that. What happens though when you do that is it will actually flip back over here to this view where we left off briefly before it switches over to the other camera. And so it's not very smooth. And so to get a smooth transition, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to set up a time delayer here. And this will give us the smooth transition that I'm looking for. And this is just something you learn when you're playing around with cameras. So I'm going to come into the time delayer, set the properties for this to be 3 seconds. And we're going to start that time delayer when the player enters this area around the mission giver. So when entered by player Annie, we'll come over here to the time delayer and start that delay. And when the delay is completed, we'll come over here to our camera, the second camera, and turn that one on. And then when this camera, whoops, not actor connection. When this camera is activated, we're going to come up to the other one up here and deactivate it. And what that will do will be to guarantee a smooth transition. Because if we just activated or deactivated this one without activating the other one, it'll jump back to the default camera, the one you normally have that follows the player. But if we switch to that other one and activate it, and then when that one's activated, we come deactivate this one, then we never have an interruption between these two cameras. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and tweak the properties, and we'll set the end transition for this to match the other one, which is swing. And since we're using the time delayer now, we don't need the defined duration here. Okay, so what we have, we've got our mission giver. We move into range for the dynamic trigger there, which will turn on that camera. And it'll also activate the time delayer over here. And 3 seconds later, this time delayer will go off, and it'll activate the second camera down there, which when that camera is activated will turn off that one up there. And the camera right now down at the end here will show for 3 seconds. So we can go ahead and test that part of this so far. So we see this one for 3 seconds, then we see that for 3 seconds. So far so good. Those views look really good. So now we've shown the player what the problem is and what the solution is. Now we need to show them how to get from here to where the solution is. I just walked back into range behind this guy. So that shows us what the solution is. Now we need to show them where and how to get there. And for that, I'm going to actually use a path. And we're going to connect this camera down here up to a path. And I had mentioned I'm going to do something a little bit different with this camera now. That will work what I've done there, and I can hook a radar marker up to this locator here, which I am going to do. But just to show you something different you can do with a camera, we're going to come over here and set up the path, and I'm going to drop a waypoint there. And I'm going to drop another one, let's see, about here. And the last one will be right there. So we got a nice straight line that camera is going to move. So now we'll come back over here to the path creator. And I'm going to come into the properties for this. We're going to leave it active. The default speed is good. I want to turn off the auto start objects when connected, because we're going to do this programmatically. And we'll go ahead and connect the camera to this path. So new path connection. There. So that puts the camera on the path. And now once this starts moving, it's basically going to zoom back away from those towards where the player is standing near the mission giver. And that will show us how to get to these ships. I'm going to go ahead and set the properties on this point. We're going to set the speed up to the max we can set it, which is 300. So the camera will start down here at the normal speed, and as we approach this point, it'll go full speed as fast as we can down to this point, because I don't want to waste a lot of time. And on this point, we're going to set this to 300 as well, so we have a consistent speed between those 2 points. And this last point we'll leave at 100, so as the player, or as the camera reaches this point, it'll start to slow down to give the player a good look at where they they are in relation to where the ships are. So now, new logic connection. When point reached by object on path, so when the camera gets to the end of this path, we're going to come over here and turn off that camera. And now because we're doing that, we do not need this defined duration here. I want the camera to stay on until it reaches the end of that path. And to start it moving, we'll come back over here to our time delayer, which we used to turn on the camera the first time. And when that delay is completed, not only will we turn on the camera, we'll also start it moving along this path. So I'll come over here and say reset and play. And likewise, at the end of this, when the point is reached by the camera, we want to go ahead and reset the path and stop, because we don't want this camera to just keep moving. And since we're going to test this a number of times, that will also reset the camera for the next time. Okay, so we've got the time delayer set up. We're going to walk into the range of this with the dynamic trigger, and it will turn that camera on up there, and eventually it'll launch the TIE fighters as well. For 3 seconds, we're going to look at that scene up there as the TIE fighters launch, and the time delayer will then kick in and switch to that camera down there and start it moving along the path. When that camera is activated, it turns that one off up there, and then we watch the spaceships and watch how to get there. When the camera reaches this point, it turns itself off and stops moving. So we can go ahead and test all of that right now before we hook up the rest of this. So let's see how that looks. So there we have the Star Destroyer, and now we have the ships, and the camera is speeding up and showing us how to get there. That's looking pretty good. And it shows where that is in relation to where we are. Perfect. I like that. Okay, so in addition to the camera though, it would be helpful to have a radar marker down there. And so we're going to go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to come over to the radar marker over here in the Creativitoys drawer. And I'm going to put this right here for the moment. And we'll go ahead and set the properties for this. So the beacon type for this will be a blue arrow to go along with the blue exclamation point. Beacon location will be the locator that I connect up in a moment. And it's going to be active when inactive when we first come into this toy box. And I think I'm going to turn this on at the same time I turn on that second camera so they can see where that radar marker is, as well as what it's pointing to. So we'll go ahead and activate that. And now we'll go ahead and move this down to the end. And we'll connect it to this locator. So this will be the focal point for the camera, and it'll also be where we show the radar marker. And so now that'll turn on at the same time this camera turns on. And we're going to need a dynamic trigger to turn this off once the player gets down here. So we'll go ahead and drop that and connect that to the locator. This is the same as we did with our waypoint last time with the other mission giver we set up. So we'll come in here to the properties. The target's not going to be this Creativitoy, it's going to be the locator. Trigger distance. Now that locator is about 3 or 4 blocks from the edge of this floor, which is where my spark is currently. And let's say it's 4 blocks. So there's 4 units for each of the blocks, so we'll set this distance to 16. So we don't have to be right on top of it to turn that off. As we get close to it, we're going to be seeing the ships anyway. And new logic connection, when we enter that radius by player any, we'll go ahead and turn off this radar marker. Okay, so that's set up. We got the camera, we've got our radar marker. And now let's go ahead and hook up the rest of everything else. So the dynamic trigger around our actor over here, the Asgardian guard, we approach him. Right now it starts the time delayer and it turns on the camera up there. We also need this to go ahead when entered by player Annie to direct the Star Destroyer to launch the TIE Fighters. That's what we want to see when that camera goes. So come up here and say start. And if we come into the properties for this, we can change the number of TIE Fighters that it launches. I'm going to leave that set at 2 for this demonstration. I'll probably set that to 4 for the actual game, but just for purposes of this video, I think 2 is sufficient. Okay, and when the time delayer goes off, we'll go ahead and turn off this dynamic trigger because there's no point in running that. We've already handled our mission giver. And we can also turn off the radar marker over top of our actor here. And the other thing we can do as well, maybe not in response to the time delayer though, probably in response to this dynamic trigger, is when we enter this area, when we approach the Asgardian guard and we enter that area, he now has our attention, so we can go ahead and just set him to stand still. So he's going to do that in a loop. So we walk up and talk to him, and as soon as we do, with that dynamic trigger, he'll stop jumping up and down. Alright, so we've set up this guy down here. We've turned on everything we need to turn on, the camera, the Star Destroyer, the time delayer. And the time delayer, when it goes off, is going to turn on the camera down there, as well as the radar marker and the path, and start the camera moving along the path. And when the camera gets down here to this point, it'll turn itself off, and it'll stop the movement along the path and reset. And when the player gets down here, the dynamic trigger turns off this waypoint, and we jump in our ship and go battle the TIE Fighters. And the last thing I'd like to do is when that last TIE Fighter is destroyed, we'd like to let the player know that they've succeeded. So we'll come over here, new logic connection on success. And we can reuse the same text displayer that we used last time for that mission. So I'm going to come over here underneath the palace where I left that. And we'll come over to this displayer. Yeah, close. Oh, nope, wrong one. All right, where are we at here? Oh, did I already hook that up? I probably already had that hooked up from an earlier run through, so let me just go ahead and turn that off. Sorry about that. I had already built this once before just to kind of run through and test and prepare for this to make sure I had everything. Yeah, so I had already had that hooked up. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete these just so I can show you how to do this. So as I said, on the Star Destroyer new logic connection, one success. That'll be when the last TIE fighter is destroyed. We'll come over here to the text displayer. And we'll come in here to victory. And I'm going to set this to say, you did it. And now I'm also going to hook it up to that same sound generator. We can play the same victory sound that we played for the last mission. So new logic connection on success. Come back down here. Do the sound generator. And it's under musical fanfare. Okay. And I think that's everything we need. And I'm going to come back here to the starting point. I could save my game anywhere, but I want to keep my save game screenshot here to be the same, because that shows the picture of Asgard with the Star Destroyer in the background and helps to set the context for my story. That and the description, as we had mentioned in the first video, help to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out and see how it goes. So Loki enters the city this time. And we see Sif over here, but I don't really like Sif, so I'm going to let her stew for a while. And we'll run over here and help this other guy. So there's another blue marker over here. He's jumping up and down, all excited about something. Hey, pal, what's the problem? Oh my, ships are launching. Oh, and there's what I can do about it with the radar marker turned on. And our camera is showing us where we need to go to get there in relation to where I currently am. Okay, so the radar marker is off of him, and it's down here now, so we'll run down this way. And those TIE fighters are still flying around up there. Interesting, that radar marker doesn't really show up. Well, now it is. You have to get kind of close to it, I guess. Good thing we put the camera on it. Now that turned off. And here we go. Let's go blow up some TIE fighters. There's one. Here's the other guy. Whoa, I was robbed. Get back here, you. Stand still. Oh, another hit without... Oh, man, how many hits do I have? There we go. We did it. So with that, the TIE fighters are gone, and we've succeeded in our little mission. Well, that worked out pretty well. We were able to tell a story without really using any words at all, except there at the very end to let the player know they succeeded. But even the sound by itself would have been enough to do that. We set up a mission giver over here. And we go ahead and land this thing. Yeah, we'll dump it on this roof. We're able to set up a mission giver over here. And when we approached, he showed us what the problem was. The TIE fighter's launching over there. He showed us where we needed to go and what to do about it. We were able to go down there and jump in the ship and blow them up and solve the mission. So I think that was a good success. We were able to tell a story doing nothing but visual storytelling, no text. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and this series on storytelling. Hopefully this gives you some ideas for how to tell a story in your own toy box using the limited text options that are available or no text at all. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel or sign up on my blog to see what we do next time. You can find build tips and logic diagrams on my blog for the different challenges that we make as well. And for now, I'm signing off from Asgard, and I'll see you next time with something brand new.